Good morning, children. So, children will continue with our next class. In our previous class, we had discussed about what is power sharing, and we had also discussed about the different types of power sharing. Children, we also discussed about the moral and prudential reasons of power sharing. To explain power sharing, I had given you example of the two countries, Belgium and Sri Lanka. That how in Belgium power sharing was practiced and how the problem was solved and the country developed. The second example that I gave you was example of Sri Lanka. In Sri Lanka, power sharing was not done and due to this, it led to a civil war. Many people died and the country did not develop at a fast rate and peace did not prevail over there. So to explain the importance of power sharing, we discussed with the examples of two countries. Then children, we also discussed about the moral and prudential reasons of power sharing. In that we discussed that moral reason means democracy and power sharing are related to each other. Power sharing is spirit of democracy. If power sharing is not there, democracy is meaningless. Then children, we also discussed about the prudential reason. Prudential reason means the practical reason of power sharing. That means if power sharing is not done, it leads to conflict in the nation and which leads to instability and development does not take place and people do not live in peace. I had also given you example of our country regarding majority and minority. So we have discussed all these things and in the last part we discussed about the different types of power sharing in which we discussed about horizontal and vertical power sharing. In horizontal power sharing, we discussed about check and balance system and how power is shared between the different levels of government. That is the different organs of government, that is legislature, judiciary and executive. In that we also discussed about check and balance system. Then children, we discussed about the vertical power sharing in which we discussed about how power is shared at different levels. That is central government, state government and local self-government. And in the last part, we discussed about the different forms of power sharing in which we discussed about that means in that we discussed about the power sharing is done between the different political party, pressure group, how power sharing is done by the different social groups. So like this we concluded the lesson. Today I will just introduce you the next lesson of political science and this next lesson is federal system. Lesson number 2 federal system is the second part of the first lesson power sharing. While teaching you power sharing, I told you regarding that I gave you example of Belgium in that I explained one point regarding federal system. Children, what is federalism? Federalism is a system in which the power is shared between the different levels of the government. That is in our country, central government, state government and later on local self-government. In this chapter, we will also discuss that why federalism was practiced in our country. Who took the decisions to practice federalism? And in this, we will discuss about how federalism is being practiced in our country, which we will discuss with the help of certain points. And the points are federalism is practiced by linguistic policy, then language policy, linguistic states, and central and state relationship. In this lesson, we will also discuss about how power is divided between the union government, state government, in which we will discuss about union list, that is central list, state list, and concurrent list. And finally, we will discuss about local self-government, that is Panchayati Raj, and how Panchayati Raj was introduced and in which year it was introduced and which Prime Minister played a very important role in implementation of Panchayati Raj. We'll also discuss about what is federalism and what are the features of federalism. And we'll also discuss about the let together federalism, and all these points we'll discuss in detail. So for today, I just giving an introduction of the second chapter, that is federalism, and in my next class we'll discuss all these points in detail. So thank you children. We'll continue in the next class, and your homework will be, you'll read lesson number 2, that is federalism, and you will complete the question answers which is given in your exercise of lesson number 1. And in this lesson only certain points are given. You will explain all these points in details in your copy and make a chart in your. So we'll continue in our next class. Thank you children.